Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that floods don't just drown things, they reveal them? What if I told you that the storm you feared might be the storm that unveils your purpose? Floods have always been symbolic in Scripture and in life, not just as agents of destruction, but as powerful tools of revelation. When we hear the word flood, we instinctively think of loss, devastation, and chaos. Yet, within the biblical pattern, floods often come with a deeper spiritual message. They expose the foundation of everything they touch. When the waters rise, they wash away appearances and show what truly remains. In other words, floods don't just destroy, they reveal. In Genesis, when the great flood came upon the earth, it didn't only wipe out what was corrupt, it also revealed what was righteous. The ark didn't magically appear above the chaos. It had been there, being built in obscurity day by day in obedience. But no one truly saw its purpose until the rains came. The flood brought visibility to what had been prepared in the quiet place. What was hidden in faith was now seen by all. The same principle applies to our lives. When storms come, emotional, financial, spiritual, they expose the reality of who we are and what we've built. When pressure is applied, true character rises. You learn quickly who is anchored and who is drifting. You find out what's authentic and what's performance. Floods strip away the excess. They remove the masks. When the familiar is swept away, your eyes are forced to see what really matters. You begin to notice what was invisible before: the quiet strength in someone's perseverance, the deep roots in someone's faith, the true value of relationships, integrity, and spiritual discipline. What once seemed small or insignificant is now clearly essential, and this is where the revelation becomes personal. The flood may come to your household, your calling, your mental health, your finances, or your ministry, but it comes with a mission, not just to test you, but to expose what's been growing silently beneath the surface. Sometimes we don't even know what's inside us until the pressure pushes it out. Faith that has never been tested can look strong, but only in the storm do you find out if it's real. Courage isn't courage until it's demanded by fear. Loyalty isn't loyalty until it's challenged. The flood brings that moment of truth. So when the flood comes, don't just look at what's gone. Look at what's been revealed. Look at what remains. Look at what's rising, because the flood isn't just an end. It's a spotlight on what was truly built to last. In the story of Noah, we see one of the most profound paradoxes in Scripture. The same waters that poured out judgment on the earth were the very waters that lifted the ark above it. While the flood brought destruction to everything that was corrupt and decayed, it also became the means through which Noah and his family were elevated. That's a powerful truth. What destroys one thing can simultaneously lift another. It all depends on what has been built, how it's been built, and whom it's been built for. When we look at the chaos of life, disasters, disappointments, broken relationships, unexpected losses, we often focus only on the damage. But what if the storm wasn't just meant to take something away, but to raise something up? The ark was not built in a time of crisis. It was built in obedience before the crisis came. It didn't rise because it was strong. It rose because it was aligned with God's design. That means what you build in seasons of peace determines how you rise in seasons of pressure. When the rains came, the people who laughed at Noah were silenced, and the structure they ignored became the only thing that could rise above the judgment. The flood is symbolic of circumstances beyond our control. It represents those overwhelming moments where everything around you seems to be sinking. Yet, if your life is built on obedience to God, those same overwhelming forces will not drown you. They will lift you. The very thing that came to destroy others can be the thing that elevates you. But it doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design. Noah didn't survive the flood because of luck. He survived because he listened. He followed every instruction God gave him down to the cubit. The result was not just survival, it was elevation. This is a spiritual principle we cannot ignore. The trials you are facing right now may be the waters God will use to raise you to new levels. It might be the financial hardship that births a new business idea. It could be the loss that leads you to deeper empathy and calling. It could be the betrayal that drives you closer to God. Destruction and elevation can ride the same current. The difference lies in whether you're anchored to fear or fastened to faith. The storm that drowns the unprepared is the same storm that carries the faithful to their next assignment. When we look at floods in a spiritual or symbolic sense, they often come with force, chaos, and the ability to overwhelm. But beyond their surface destruction, there's something deeper taking place. A flood doesn't just wash away, it exposes. It acts as a filter, removing what can endure and allowing only what's real, rooted, and righteous to remain. That's why we must understand this is not just a flood, it's a filter. God often allows shaking not to punish, but to purify. The waters rise not only to judge, but to refine. What survives the flood is what was built with integrity, faith, and alignment with His purpose. In a time of cultural confusion, moral compromise, and spiritual lukewarmness, floods are necessary. They press through the noise, cut through the illusions, and lay bare what was hidden beneath the surface. Things that look strong from a distance, systems, movements, even ministries or relationships, are tested when the waters come. The flood exposes whether the foundation was built on rock or sand. It shows who is walking in truth and who is only performing for applause. In this way, the flood doesn't just reveal what's weak. It confirms what's genuine. This filtering is not always comfortable. It strips away comfort zones. It challenges what's convenient, but it also brings clarity. After the water settles, you're left with what matters. Some people may walk away from your life during a flood season, and while that hurts, it's also revealing. They weren't anchored. Some ideas may collapse. Some dreams may be delayed. But what remains is what's been filtered by purpose. The flood draws a line between the temporary and the eternal, the counterfeit and the consecrated. God allows filters in our lives not to discourage us, but to prepare us. There are things you can't carry into your next season. Weights, habits, alliances, or beliefs that the flood is meant to wash away. If you try to cling to them, you'll miss what God is refining. The flood tests our attachments. It asks you, are we more loyal to what's comfortable or to what's true? Are we building for approval or for eternity? Once the waters come, pretending is no longer an option. You either float or you sink. And what floats has been tested and proven. So when it feels like everything around you is being shaken, don't just ask what's being lost. Ask what's being revealed. The flood is not just taking things away. It's showing you what was worth keeping all along. There is a calling placed on your life that the flood cannot cancel. When storms rise and the waters begin to cover familiar ground, the natural instinct is to panic, to assume the worst, to believe that you're being overwhelmed. But God never designed you to be a victim of the flood. You were not created to drown in the chaos. You were created to rise above it. The very breath of God within you is a reminder that His Spirit lifts, strengthens, and sustains. You are called to rise, not drown. All throughout Scripture, God's people have faced waters, seas, rivers, floods, and every time He makes a way through or above them. The Israelites stood before the Red Sea with an enemy behind them and nowhere to run. Yet, God split the waters and called them forward. Peter walked on water in the middle of a storm as long as his eyes were on Jesus. And Noah's Ark was lifted up by the floodwaters that swallowed the rest of the world. These are not just stories, they are spiritual templates for how God works with those He has chosen. You may feel surrounded by waves right now, but that is not your end. That is your rising. Rising doesn't always look like immediate victory. Sometimes it looks like persistence in prayer, even when answers haven't come. Sometimes it looks like holding on to faith when everything around you says it's pointless. Rising is often a quiet, a daily decision to stand when everything else says sink. But heaven sees that choice. God honors that resolve. When you refuse to drown in fear, bitterness, or despair, you are aligning yourself with the very nature of God's Spirit, which lifts and empowers. The enemy wants you to believe that your flood is final. That because something failed, you're finished. That because something ended, you have no future. But that's a lie. The truth is, your calling is not void just because your circumstances are turbulent. God has a plan in the flood. There's something He's building in you right now, a deeper trust, a greater capacity, a stronger faith. That couldn't be formed any other way. The waters may be rising, but so are you. And what God has called to rise, no flood can hold down. So whether you're battling pressure in your family finances, mind, or ministry, take heart. This season is not your grave. It's your launching ground. You were never meant to drown in this. You were meant to rise through it. There comes a moment in every generation when comfort can no longer sustain calling, when silence becomes agreement, and when delay becomes disobedience. That moment is not someday in the future, it is now. This is the hour of awakening, not just for a nation, a church, or a culture, but for individuals who have been asleep to their purpose and their authority and their responsibility in the kingdom. Something is shaking the earth, not to destroy it, but to wake it. God is sounding an alarm, not to scare his people, but to stir them. The spiritual slumber that once masked complacency must now give way to clarity, courage, and conviction. Awakening doesn't start with a movement. It starts with a person. It starts with someone realizing that they can't live in neutral anymore. It starts when the distractions of this world lose their grip and the voice of God becomes louder than the opinions of man. It happens when people who once felt disqualified suddenly remember that grace didn't just save them, it empowered them. The hour of awakening is when you stop asking for permission to walk in purpose and start stepping into the authority you've already been given. It's the realization that you're not waiting on God. He's been waiting on you. There's a holy unrest rising across the earth. A generation is beginning to ask deeper questions. They're not satisfied with shallow answers or surface-level religion. They're hungry for truth, for the presence of God, for a faith that transforms, not just comforts. This is more than emotion, it's a spiritual stirring. The dry bones are rattling, the sleepers are rising, the warriors are awakening. And it's not limited to the pulpit. It's happening in homes, in schools, in businesses, in hearts that are fully surrendered. To awaken means to see clearly. It means recognizing the urgency of the times and the power of your role in them. It's not about fear. It's about alignment. It's about stepping into who you were created to be before the world told you to blend in. There's an assignment with your name on it that can't be fulfilled from a place of slumber. The kingdom needs your voice, your gift, your obedience. You were born for this hour, crafted for this moment, and equipped for this battle. You don't need to be famous to be effective. You just need to be awake. Because the time is now and heaven is moving. In moments of hardship, it's easy to focus only on the loss, the pain, or the chaos. The natural response to a flood, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is to resist it, to fear it, or to curse it. But often, what feels like devastation is actually divine transportation. The flood you're facing may seem like it's come to take you under, but in reality, it may be the very thing God is using to lift you into a place you could never reach on your own. That's why you must not curse the flood. It's carrying you higher. Sometimes the only way God can move you out of what's familiar is by shaking the ground beneath your feet. The flood doesn't show up to comfort your routine. It shows up to shift your position. Just like Noah's Ark had no steering wheel and no sails, it wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to rise. That means the ark was not in charge of where it was going. It simply moved with the waters. Likewise, you don't need to control every outcome in your life when the flood comes. You just need to stay in alignment with what God told you to build. The same waters that wiped out the old world carried Noah and his family into a new beginning. The reason so many curse the flood is because they only see what it's taking away. But God sees what it's making room for. The flood clears out what was blocking you. It removes people, mindset systems, and structures that you didn't realize were limiting your growth. It doesn't feel like promotion. It feels like pressure. But pressure is often the birthplace of purpose. In the shaking, something inside you begins to awaken. Faith becomes more than a concept. It becomes your anchor. You begin to realize that what you thought would break you is actually shaping you. What you thought would end your story is pushing you into the next chapter. That's why perspective matters. If all you see is destruction, you'll miss the deliverance that's coming through the same flood. If all you feel is fear, you'll miss the faith that's being formed in the rising waters. The flood is not your enemy, it's the vehicle. And what feels like loss may be the launch into your calling. The higher ground God is taking you to often requires going through unfamiliar waters. You may not understand the full picture yet, but you weren't meant to stay where you were. The flood is moving you forward, lifting you up, and positioning you for something greater than what you left behind.